Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of the Thyroid Answers Podcast. I have another guest today. Her name is Sara Banta. She is a health coach. She's a podcast host. She is a health advocate, and she has her own supplemental company. And we brought her on here today to discuss maybe some of the challenges going on in the world today with the health crisis we have, and maybe talk about the pros, the cons of supplementation, and probably a lot more. We'll see how this goes. But Sara, welcome to the Thyroid Answers Podcast. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Super excited for this discussion.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. And maybe the place to start is to give everybody a little bit of background on who Sara is and maybe why we should listen to her.
Okay, so I graduated from college from Stanford as an econ major, psychology major, and went into real estate and also dabbled into the stock market. Never thought I would be here doing what I'm doing. I also was the shy person of my friend group, never really spoke out. And the fact that I love to talk on podcasts is just truly a God thing. So I always knew that I was picky with food, but I was picky with food because I didn't feel good and I was trying to feel good. And this is back 30 years ago when we didn't have the information we had today about leaky gut and thyroid issues and brain fog. I had type A personality. I just willed myself through it. I was an athlete. I was a good student. I tried to be the good girl in the family. So definitely a people pleaser. But as I was going along and then got married, started having children, I have 3 kids now, my health just dwindled because what happens when you're pregnant? Every nutrient goes to that baby and you suffer. And so all of my health issues got worse and worse and worse until I finally went to every doctor. GI doctors put things down me, around me, and in me, and said, oh, you've got IBS, go take some Metamucil. And I said, well, you don't think I've tried that already? So no answers. I met my mentor, who is into a master herbalist in Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, but also used a machine called the Skio machine, which is a scalar frequency device to scan your body for 10,000 items. And he looked at me and he said, Sara, how did you walk into my office? He said, you have nothing in you. Your food, the food is rotting in your gut. Your thyroid's in the tank. You're through the roof with heavy metals. My hair was falling out. My skin was breaking out, bloated all the time, constipated, all the things. And so he said, we're going to start peeling you like an onion. He told me a little bit about diet. But first, he just really wanted to start helping me feel a little better so that I could then have the energy to take the next step. And as we were working on myself and my kids were getting older, my eldest, my 9-year-old son, went from being the typical boy to not wanting to go to school, having headaches, not wanting to go to his baseball practice. And I'm like, what's going on here? So we scanned him and didn't know what was seen on the scan, but the practitioner said you need to go get a live blood cell test and see what's really going on in his blood. So we did, and the practitioner there was very blunt, and my son's sitting right next to me, and she said, Sara, he's got leukemia, and if you don't do something about this right now, we are going to have a serious issue. And I started crying. I have 2 younger girls at home. I've got a husband. And the weight of the world is on my shoulders. And my son looks at me and he goes, Mom, why are you crying? You're going to fix me. And I said, you're right. And so with that, we started him on my now flagship product, which is accelerated. It's a colloidal silver, but it's scalar enhanced. And I really didn't know anything about diet back then, didn't really understand organic. I had raised him on microwavable corn dogs. And within a year, his life started coming back. His teacher said, I don't know what was going on a couple months ago, but that was not your son. We're going to look at his grades now. He started having the energy, not just to go to one practice, but he's the kid that's like, Mom, I need basketball and baseball in one day. And I didn't really feel comfortable and breathe easy until we went back and had another live blood cell test. And the same very blunt lady looks at me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful blood I've ever seen. Not only are the cancer cells gone, but the cells are full and plump and dark and nutriently dense." And I started laughing and crying at the same time. And my son looks at me and goes, "Mom, I knew you'd do it." And so that was at the point where I thought, I've got something here, and this is my calling. I've got friends that are putting their 2-year-olds on steroids for the common cold. They need to know that there's more out there. And so I just dove in deep into educating myself with my mentor as far as Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, the more modern day nutraceuticals, and then diet. And, back then I had such success with supplements that I was the type, Eric, and we were talking about this before we got on, I'd just throw handfuls of supplements down me, and supplements would fix everything. And supplements are amazing. But fast forward to the last couple of years, especially this last year, my lesson was supplements are supplements to a diet, to lifestyle, to sleep, to exercise, to movement. And it's not just about what you're consuming, but it's about what you've taken out and what we're eliminating, the toxins, and we'll get into all of that, and the wrong foods, and even the wrong healthy foods, which I'd love to get into.
Sure.
And so with that, my son, yes, he had cancer. My 2 daughters did not have cancer, but they sure had their health issues. And I truly believe God gave me 5 very different profiles of people in my family. So I was forced to overcome multiple different issues. My one daughter, I loved her, but I did not like her at the age of 4. She would not get up. She would not go for a family bike ride. She had no energy. She was asthmatic, anemic, allergies through the roof. I've never had allergies. I've never had to deal with allergies. That girl who I couldn't get to ride her bike around the block is now at USC on the crew team. Rowing is one of the most difficult sports out there physically, and she's doing it. She's 6 feet tall, and she's an extreme athlete. My youngest was probably my healthiest of all of them, but in school, great at math. "Mom, you can't do this on Thursday because you're taking so-and-so to the dentist." I mean, she was very methodical and organized, but she could not comprehend what she was reading. And it wasn't ADHD, it wasn't dyslexia, it was undiagnosed. And I didn't know what to do with it because my 2 other kids had no problems in that area. And what I had to learn was strip away the anxiety, lean on diet, get some coping mechanisms. And that girl is now going to Boston University. She's in all AP honors classes. She gets mad at herself if she's less than a 95% in a class, which I can't even comprehend because I never got a 95% or above in a class. But she has overcome that. And so with all of these different health challenges, I have come to determine that everything is reversible. Unless you ruin your teeth, everything is reversible. And it's not just a magic pill. It's not just supplements. It's diet, sleep, movement, stress, not just food you're eating, but the food you're not eating, and the water you're drinking, the air you're breathing, the clothes you're wearing, and exposing your skin to. It's all of these things together, which makes it a lot more difficult and can be overwhelming to most people. But you take it one step at a time, you start feeling better, you get motivated to do more, and that's the process. And I always try to remind people, don't get overwhelmed. I've been doing this for 15 years, and it's been a progress for me. And even in this last year, Eric, I've had to learn my lessons. And I've gone through some issues with my liver. The pandemic has completely changed the landscape of health with the spike protein and what it has done to the liver, inflammation, oxidative stress, the brain, increasing anxiety and depression, backing up the liver, clogging the detox pathways. So even some supplements and food that you're taking could actually be making things worse.
Yeah.
It's also made it so that the whole supplement industry in general is allowing more bacterial and mold counts in their supplements. So you might be taking a supplement for your health, but it's got so much mold in it that it's actually making you have allergies and inflammation and not absorbing the actual thing that you are taking that pill and spending the money on for. So there's a lot of intricacies in our health and navigating it versus what our parents had to deal with or
Yeah.
our grandparents.
All right. So let's back up a little bit and cover a couple things. Okay. So it's important almost to everybody who gets into this health space, and especially from a functional medicine perspective, usually something drives them to it, right? Sometimes it's our own illness. Sometimes it's family illness that really drives us into it and becomes the passion. So for good or bad, you got into this process and you found your passion, which is awesome. What I'm curious about, and this is important for the listeners, because a lot of times we wait for somebody to diagnose us with something and then say, oh, I have this. I have ADD. That's why I behave like this. I have depression. That's why I behave like this. I have hypothyroidism. That's why I feel like this. I have fatty liver. That's why I act like this, right? The reality is that that's not the case. The reality is the diagnosis that we're waiting to hear and waiting for maybe a medical physician to treat is the outcome. It's the long-term dysregulation and dysfunction that we see. It's the pathology, the cancer that we see. Everybody's making abnormal cells, cancer cells, and all the time we have natural killer cells that are always on surveillance taking these things out. So is it possible somebody may have been sitting back on, how would they see abnormal cells on cancerous cells on there? Abnormal cells are the cells, if they start to replicate, that they become cancer cells. But the good part is when you have a healthy immune system, you always have these surveillance cells that are out there identifying abnormal cells and getting rid of them. That's why we all don't develop cancer like immediately, even though we have abnormal cell development. But I'm curious, when you started this process with your mentor and you talk about all of these things are gone, right? You're micronutrient deficient, all these things. The easy answer is you're just micronutrient deficient, which I hear a lot. Like, I had my organic acid test and I had all these micronutrient deficiencies. That's why I'm on it. I'm like, well, then you didn't have a micronutrient deficiency. You had a poor diet, a poor digestion, a poor assimilation, or a cell stress response where you're working to use those things appropriately. But early in your process, like, what was the discussion like? And then when you start to see your child having issues, did the conversation revolve around deficiencies in nutrition, or did the conversation revolve around what's allowing you to have these, what look like nutritionally? Sometimes it's resource allocation, but what was the initial conversation?
Great question. Initially, way back when, it was all about the deficiencies and filling in the deficiencies. But the point that you're bringing up right now is something I'm experiencing today. And if I can jump into that real quick, is where today I am the type of person, I've always loved protein. I always know that the power of protein, I screamed at the rooftop of eating and focusing on your protein, especially for women as we get older, for muscles and hair and organs and blood sugar and all the things. But last fall, my liver enzymes were at 700. They're supposed to be close to 20, right?
Yeah.
So any liver doctor would have not let me leave the hospital. But what I did was I started with that being said, I didn't understand why I was losing muscle. It did not make sense. I was eating tons of protein. I was supplementing with the supplements. I was using digestive enzymes to break down the protein. But the problem is guess where the protein is broken down and metabolized and assimilated? It's in your liver. My liver could not handle it. It could not do what it was supposed to do. It could not break down the fats because it was so backed up and it was stressed out. And it was from actually a supplement, not one of mine, that was toxic to my liver. And with that, I also could not break down fats. So I had to be put on a very low protein or low animal protein diet and low fat diet just for a period of time. I started taking our liver supplement. I then was able to slowly bring back the protein when my liver got better. And within 2.5 weeks of supplementing, but like I said, it's not just about what you're taking, it's about what did you remove. Because I could not, if I continued to put the pressure on my liver with the foods, even though they were the healthy foods that were hard on my liver at the time, it was going to be like taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So I had to remove the foods that were putting pressure on my liver. I had to help with the supplements to help cleanse, regenerate, and rebuild the liver. And now I'm able to actually build the muscle mass back up. So back to your question, when I first started out, it was all about throwing the nutrients at it, throwing the supplements, cleaning up the diet. That's when I started learning about organic versus non-organic, and that maybe microwavable corn dogs is not the right food for my son, but more of the organic meats and real vegetables and anything that wasn't packaged. And what was so great about this, and this is the point that I really want to get across, is that every challenge, whether it's in health or finances or relationship, it is there. It's meant to be there, whether you believe in God or the universe. It's meant to be there to strengthen your muscles, to learn a lesson for something deeper that's going to come down the pipeline. And so with that being said, my son to this day is a 22-year-old about to graduate from college. He is skiing in Utah and mountain bike riding and going to the gym all in one day because he appreciates his body because of what he had gone through. He feeds himself really well. He doesn't get the McDonald's when his friends are going to McDonald's. It's not that he doesn't drink alcohol, but he drinks a fraction of what the typical college student does because he appreciates his health and he doesn't take it for granted. So with that being said, I, over the years, have learned that with supplements, sometimes less is more. And there's a right place for it. And a supplement isn't meant to be a forever sometimes. Some maybe yes, some maybe not. Some maybe just pulsing. Maybe your body gets used to it too much. It's just like a diet. If you're eating the same food every single day, and then you go to a restaurant and you have something that's off that same diet, your gut's going to say, oh, wait a second. I'm not prepared to digest this food. I haven't seen it in a long time. So now I approach it differently. I also see everybody as an individual. The dietary choices, whether you're keto, carnivore, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, it doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong or right, but there are ways to fill in the gaps in all the different diets, and your DNA plus your current state of health determine what foods and what supplements will work for you. If I'm super strong and healthy and my immune system is buzzing and I have not been exposed to a virus, I can handle foods that I can't handle when I just got off a plane and I'm drained and my adrenals are burned out and my immune system is tapped. And there's also times where what I've learned through my daughters with their menstrual cycles, as we are in a time where the spike protein has completely rocked female hormones, whether you're young and your PMS symptoms are through the roof, like I've had to experience with my daughter, to the point where she's throwing up and yelling at me that she wants to pass out because the pain is so horrific, to the 20, 30-year-old woman trying to get pregnant, and fertility has extremely been diminished over the last couple of years. Or if you're a menopausal woman where your hot flashes and your weight gain are worse than ever. So the hormonal balance is completely been screwed up. But what I learned was there are certain foods that you can eat during the first half of your cycle, but not close to your menstruation. And so there's a lot of nuance. There's not just a one answer for everybody, but I try to teach people to really tap into their intuition and know what their body's telling them, because their body is a miracle and it is what is going to heal them from whatever chronic disease they're experiencing.
Yeah. So again, we'll kind of wrap up some of that stuff because it was a lot covered there, but I think a couple key things are really important. And the reason I asked that question in the beginning about what was the thought about root issue, and for a lot of people, they're probably listening to this and hearing the same thing, that I was told the issue is I've got nutrient deficiencies. And most of the people here have some tie to thyroid related problems, but you hear this a lot in the thyroid space, that the reason you have a thyroid condition might be because you have a selenium deficiency, or the reason you have a conversion issue or production issue is because of a micronutrient deficiency. And if we just give you this supplement that has these extra ingredients in it, this is going to fix the problem. And it's usually not the case. And so I do think that I've been doing this 30 years. And so I do think a lot of this stuff in the beginning was, they got this issue, you give them this supplement that has these additional ingredients, and make the assumption that everything was going to work the way we want it to. Like sending it, if you send your kid to your room and say, clean your room, we send them to the room, they're going to clean the room. And the reality is you could send them to the room to clean the room and they may not do it at all. And you could be shocked, but why didn't they do it? Because they didn't feel like it. And I think that's one of the most important things that we should discuss now is this idea. And you hinted to it when you said the state of your physiology determines what you're going to be able to break down, to digest the food, the nutrition. I think when we're in a homeostatic state, we get away with doing a lot of things that may not be overly healthful. And as long as they're short-term stressors, not only can we overcome what the challenge that occurs, but those things may actually make us stronger and more resilient in time. So the idea that, hey, I'm never going to have stressed life. I'm never going to have food that stresses me. I'm never going to do activity that stresses me. I'm never going to have an argument. All of that is pie in the sky. And two, it actually wouldn't make you stronger and more resilient going forward in life. Just like we lift weights, break our muscles down. And somebody would say, well, that's why I don't lift, because you're breaking your muscle down. But yes, that action of breaking the muscle down and then allowing for recovery actually makes me stronger and more resilient. From a food standpoint, people are, the carnivore community, plant foods have toxins, therefore they're all bad for you. They're no good for you. But that's a nice, simple way to look at it, but it's not the reality. Plant-based foods do have some toxic things in them that trigger the immune and the inflammatory systems and help us build an intestinal immune system that can become more resistant in time and defend us. And so some of these diet wars are okay. I understand what they're saying. Hey, I'm going to do this diet. It's going to shift my signs and symptoms and my biome. Sure, temporarily. But a lot of these things are temporary things at best, but not long-term strategies. So I want you to kind of talk about your perspective on state. What's your perception on the idea or the concept that we operate really in these two different states. And it is that state that's going to make the difference how an intended treatment, therapy, supplement, medication may or may not work.
Well, I had two conversations just this morning that kind of touch on what we're talking about. One is with a mom who has two daughters on antidepressants, and she is going, I don't know what to do. She's had to be on Prozac since she was 7 years old. She's also on anti-anxieties. And I'm sitting there going, okay, have we looked at her hormones? Have we looked at her diet? Have we looked at her nutritional deficiencies? The answer is no. So that is what the doctors throw at you. And maybe it works for somebody. If it works for somebody, great. They're not coming to you and me, Eric. If they're feeling great, they're not talking to you and me. But then I also got another email from a lady. She's menopausal. She's down to 2 meals a day. And actually, it wasn't even 2 meals. It was a snack and then a dinner. She can't lose weight. She has brain fog. Her thyroid's in the tank. She is eating a kale and spinach smoothie as her snack. And she leans on nuts. Okay, well, first thing that comes to my mind, and now I'm not saying these foods are bad for everybody, but she is not getting her results. So let's look at, hey, that kale, the spinach, full of oxalates. Kale is also full of sulfur. Unfortunately, sulfur is not a bad thing, but glyphosate has disrupted our sulfur detox pathways. So those healthy foods like cauliflower, cabbage, broccoli, garlic, onions, egg yolks, and kale could be backing up your liver. Now, if you're in a great current state of health and your sulfur detox pathways are working great, you can eat those foods. And maybe the same person cannot eat them, but then can eat them once they improve their health. And the oxalates love the thyroid. So oxalates can cause hypothyroidism. And that's the almonds, the spinach, berries to a lesser extent, nuts, most nuts. And then you've got nuts that have lectins, and a lot of nuts also have mold. And mold has been really triggered due to the spike protein because it is causing more oxalates for the body to produce on its own, and that is strengthening biofilm, and it's strengthening the amyloids that are in the body. So all of these things are kind of this chain reaction, and these amyloids are misfolded proteins that can't get broken down by the liver. And what else has amyloids? Chicken, pork, conventionally raised beef. It's not the chicken's fault. It is the fault of the crowded environments where those proteins get misfolded and the liver can't break them down to use them, so they get lodged into other tissues in your body, like your brain, but they also cause the bad gut pathogens to overtake the good good bacteria. And here you are thinking you're eating a good, healthy, low-fat chicken and broccoli dinner. And you wonder why you're bloated, your thyroid feels low, your brain fog is getting worse. So another symptom that I've had, and I had to pinpoint it, no doctor could tell me, but I figured it out, was that anytime I had a really heavy protein meal, during this last period of when my liver was really struggling, my vision would go. My vision would go blurry. I have 20/20. And people would say, oh, it's because you're 49. You're getting old, you need glasses. I'm like, no, because my eyes are perfect when they're perfect. But I would get this vision because your liver is and your eyes are directly correlated. So that's where you have to kind of really become in tune with your own body and go, no, doctor, I'm not normal. It's not normal to gain weight when you're going through menopause. It's not normal to have brain fog and your hair falling out. That's not, or maybe it's normal because the normal population is sick, but that's not optimal. So with all of that being said, it's some of these foods, like the oxalates, the sulfur, amyloid proteins, possibly too high of a fat diet. I know a lot of people that were trying to go keto and they said, I just can't do keto. I gain weight. I feel nauseous. Well, if you feel nauseous when you eat a high fat meal, it means your gallbladder and your liver are struggling and they're backed up and they cannot process the fat. Maybe you need a liver cleanse. Maybe you just need liver support. Maybe you need to look at being on a lower fat, higher clean protein diet, fill in with the vegetables that work for your genetics at this time in this current state of health to let your body kind of cleanse itself naturally. And where is your stress level? How are you sleeping? You know, those two things are the things that are free. You guys, they're free. I go to bed at the same time it is priority. All of this other stuff means nothing if you're not sleeping. And when we talk about, for instance, the example that I brought up earlier with a child that is on medication for her anxiety, what is she eating? Processed foods account for 70% of a child's diet today in America. Those processed foods steal ATP from the cells. And they're loaded with toxins. They're loaded with the high fructose corn syrup, the inflammatory seed oils. I know seed oils is a hot topic. Seed oils aren't a problem when you're eating them from natural sources 50 years ago, but when our diet is loaded with them, with the processed foods, it's extremely inflammatory to the brain, causing brain fog and ADHD and depression and Alzheimer's. And these processed foods have no fiber and no protein. They cause overeating. And then you've got all of the environmental toxins that we didn't have 30 years ago, the pesticides, the herbicides, the plastics, chemicals, the bromides. When we talk about thyroid, the need for iodine, and this is something that I am really passionate about because it's not just about feeding your thyroid iodine, it's about kicking out these other toxins. As if you are iodine deficient, which 96% of the United States is, then the fluoride, bromide, and chlorine are going to fit in those receptor sites, clog them, and cause chronic disease and issues. And hypothyroidism is being one of them. But I live in Southern California. I'm an hour away from Los Angeles. I fortunately have my house saved. Nothing happened, to my personal belongings during the fires in LA. But you better believe I surely breathed in all of those toxins from the fires. And the fire retardant that they pour down on the fire is bromide. Bromide's illegal in Europe for a reason. Fluoride has become a huge hot topic in the United States in the water because there's studies showing it lowers IQ in children. Well, the thing that increases IQ in children is iodine. So we've got iodine that's been diminished in our soils and our diet, and we've got the fluorides and the toxins that have increased, and hypothyroidism has increased.
Well, it has, but we're going off on lots of different tangents, and
Yeah.
I want to kind of hit these topics as we go through them. On the we can cycle back to the halide story. I don't know that the mechanisms, especially in functional medicine, that are talked about of how these things work are actually accurate. We talk about them blocking iodine uptake. The sodium iodine symporter doesn't transport these things across. There's literature on both sides, but I think the story is, maybe for the simplicity of having the conversation, is not quite accurate to what maybe might be going on. And I think there's things we still need to consider. I would agree with you that there's a level of toxicity that we're exposed to, but how these things actually initiate problems with the thyroid physiology may not be the idea that they're blocking iodine utilization per se, or blocking iodine uptake to the thyroid gland. The sodium iodide symporter doesn't transport those halides, so it's still getting in there. From a fluoride perspective, or a bromine or a bromide perspective, or a chloride perspective, we have chloride in the body. It's critically important. I do think from a fluoride perspective, and maybe from a bromide perspective, how they may influence iodine at the thyroid gland may be more of how they impact the iodide, the pedrin transporter inside the thyroid cells to transport chloride and iodine in and out of the cell itself. So I think that may be more the issue than where it's creating problems with iodide uptake. We do know, it looks like on the research, that high levels of bromine or bromide in the body can increase the loss of iodine. And one of those mechanisms is because of increased urinary loss of iodine. The other might be if it is replacing chloride on the pedrin transporter, that it may be causing the iodine to not be able to be utilized, and it's getting wasted. As far as the other tissues, some of those things may have an impact or have a blocking impact on some of the receptors, but this whole topic of the iodine story, lots of controversy, lots of arguments in both directions. We've got really two camps that are out there. One is the camp that says iodine's bad for everybody who's got a thyroid condition. The other camp that says everybody with a thyroid condition needs lots of iodine. That's the answer, and that's the solution. And I think both of those arguments are too simplistic. And I think it comes down to more that we have to be aware that each person's unique, and that what we provide may not always work the way we want it to, even from an iodine standpoint. If we're in cell stress, one of the things the body's going to do is going to use iodine as a antimicrobial. I mean, a potent antimicrobial. And there's discussion in the literature that that's part of the reason why thyroid hormone is deactivated, so that we can pull iodine off in the cells and use it with myeloperoxidase to produce this really high potency antimicrobial. So the body often does things that make us feel not so good in an attempt to protect us from stuff. So I want to try and kind of take this process kind of, in an organized fashion, so that we can we don't get too many tangents. You had a lot of good points in there, and it's hard to come back and cycle back to them. And my brain is allowing me to remember the last one that goes on. But I think what we need to consider is, and without stressing a lot of people out, and it was one of the points I was trying to kind of get to at the start, was we're told a story a lot of times in allopathic medicine. The story about hypothyroidism is that your immune system is going to damage your gland. That's the cause of it. And maybe 95% in some models say that it's an immune-driven disorder. They say the likelihood that it's an iodine issue is low, but of course we don't test anybody to find out if there's an iodine deficiency, so we don't know. But if we go with the idea that 95% of the cases of hypothyroidism are immune-driven processes, then allopathic medicine would say your gland's going to be destroyed. There's nothing you can do about it. The thyroid gland can't recover. The long-term goal is to give you thyroid medication when your gland can't make it anymore. And then once we give you enough T4, life is good. Everything is going to work the way we want it to. The problem with that is the medical community is not considering the state. What's the state of the cell? Are the cells going to are they going to use that T4 converted to T3 to support healthy metabolism as if we're in thyroid communication mode? Or are they going to deactivate thyroid hormone T4, T3 into less active or inactive forms in an effort to keep us in this thyroid protective mode? Right. That's that model. In functional medicine, we often diagnose somebody and we say it's an immune-driven process, and many times still say the same thing, that the immune system's out of control. We're going to have to give you T4. but we're going to be a little bit better than the medical doctors because we're going to give you T3 because they don't realize your body forgot how to convert T4 to T3 and it can no longer do it. So we're going to give you T3 and we're going to just give you plenty of T4 and plenty of T3. We're not caring about the TSH anymore. Who cares about that? We're just going to give you lots of hormone and we still assume that it's going to work the way we want it to. It can change how we feel without a doubt. Those medications you were talking about for the mom and her kid, like, and anxiety, antidepressants, can they change your symptoms? Absolutely. Medications can do that. Supplements can do that sometimes as well. Does it change your state? Does it improve homeostasis? And the answer is many times it does not. So knowing those things
makes it worse.
Oh, many times makes it worse. Even, and I talk about this a lot in thyroid world, is that a lot of the people in thyroid physiology are stuck in what I call thyroid purgatory. They're for years, they struggle with hypothyroid signs and symptoms because they have a cell stress inflammatory process and what we call thyroid allostasis. Part of the protective response is to downregulate the metabolism of the cell on purpose, downregulate mitochondria, stiffen cell membranes. I've talked about this on the podcast multiple times. That is a protective response. If we flood somebody with more thyroid hormone in the situation where the cells didn't want it to begin with, could it potentially create worsening of symptoms? Absolutely. It increases the saturation to the brain, which is much more sensitive based on the receptors that are there. It further increases the sympathetic nervous system, which is already upregulated, probably further decreasing the parasympathetic nervous system, downregulate sex hormones, downregulate gut function. And by flooding the system with more thyroid hormone, we're actually making the internal cellular conversion of a lot of cells worse, because as you have more thyroid hormone in the system, in circulation, it downregulates what we call deiodinase 2, so we can't make it as well. So absolutely, sometimes the support, especially with medication, becomes problematic.
Well, to add to that, I mean, I'm sure you have many people that come to you saying, my doctor put me on more T4 and I'm worse and I'm gaining more weight. And then the other thing, to touch on my own experience, I'm not on thyroid medication, but when my liver was backed up and I was really struggling with my liver health, guess what else was suffering? My thyroid numbers were in the tank, because the liver is where most of that T4 converts into T3. Something wasn't working. My body was stressed. It said, okay, we're running from a tiger. We're facing a famine. I don't know what the stressor is. I'm going to shut down the metabolism and I'm going to protect these expensive organs like the liver and the kidneys and the gut, and put on some belly fat, eat away at muscles. And it doesn't matter what medication you give me, I'm in survival mode.
Absolutely. And the argument would be, is the downregulation of your thyroid gland the problem or the adaptive response to the chronic cell stress that's going on in your liver? I would argue that it's an appropriate adaptive response, because if you continue to upregulate thyroid hormone and didn't have that break on it, and you've got abnormal cells going on, T4 should convert to T3 inside the cell and stimulate metabolism. But when you stimulate metabolism, you're also increasing oxidative stress. If the cells already got inflammatory cell stress mechanisms going on, the cell membrane's already stiffer than it should be. We're not crossing nutrients across that barrier. That's part of that whole cell stress response, to not bring more resources into a stressed or cell that may have some type of potential threat in it. So then if we take that T4 can bind to integrin receptors on the outside of cells, especially abnormal cells, and cause cell replication and increase DNA production. I've run mitochondrial studies and shown how thyroid hormone actually increases mitochondrial density. And most people would say, especially if you're working out, you'd say, well, that's great. I need that for my muscles to grow. I want more mitochondrial density. My liver's loaded with mitochondria. I want more mitochondrial density. The problem is, if you have more mitochondrial density in an unhealthy cell, what you're going to get is more oxidative stress. And if I have cell stress going on that cell, and that cell's adaptively decreasing the absorption of nutrients into the cell, I can't make enough antioxidants. And so that ramping up of the thyroid hormone to make somebody's number, like I need to get you into this optimal range, actually can contribute to not just more oxidative stress cell damage and more signs and symptoms, but there's a lot of literature that's now coming out in the last 5 years that's indicating that it can also increase the replication of abnormal cells, which we call cancer, which is been my big beef for the last 10 years. If hypothyroidism is a protective response, as I argue it is in many cases, and we're adding more hormone to a system that didn't want it or need it to begin with, are we actually increasing the risk of multiple types of diseases and cancers in some of our people, in our patients, not because we're bad people, but because we're trying to fix a number instead of fixing the issue, the load, the problem. And the literature is clearly starting to show that that's a big issue with patients. Once they're 5-10 years on thyroid medication, the incidence of so many cancers goes up through the roof.
What's so interesting about what you're saying is that when my liver was struggling and my thyroid was in the tank, my testosterone was also in the tank, and I had a functional doctor who you and I both know, who just wanted to throw testosterone at it and free T3. And I was smart enough to know, no, my body is trying to figure things out itself. It's in a protective mode right now, temporarily, because I've always had great testosterone. That has not been my issue. So I knew my body was doing something to protect itself. And if I were to try to throw something at it, it would have been just another stressor that it had to deal with while it was trying to fight this big fight over here.
Yeah.
And it just really speaks to what we started with as far as, the body's the miracle. It's not just about throwing tons of supplements and medication, but it's also about what are you taking away, giving your body the room to heal itself, and then kind of seeing where you're at. And then maybe doing supplementation or possibly medication if you still need it. But the amount of stories people are coming to me about, they're on this much medication, they're on this, they feel worse, they're on HRT, they feel worse. And no one is addressing the other aspects of their health.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And for the listeners, this is like critical to understand. There are, regardless of whether it's allopathic medicine or functional medicine, there's strategy. Strategy A is a management strategy, and you can do it in allopathic medicine and you can do it in functional and integrative medicine. The management strategy is this value is lab high or lab low, and I'm going to give you something that's going to manipulate that into range, and we're going to call you now normal. And does it change the value? Probably. Does it fix the underlying physiology? No. If we use blood pressure as a problem, if you have high blood pressure, the high blood pressure is not the problem. It can create problems, but it is not the problem. So what happens in traditional medicine is we say you have high blood pressure, that could cause a stroke. Okay. I could probably name at least 10, maybe 19 different mechanisms by which that blood pressure could be elevated, drivers of that. But in the management model, that doesn't matter. What matters is I need to lower the blood pressure with a medication. And it works. Blood pressure goes down. The problem is many times the blood pressure is elevated because there's inflammatory mechanisms going on that's causing vasoconstriction. And your brain is saying, I need oxygen. I need blood flow. I need to get blood flow to my extremities. So the body is increasing the pressure to try and get oxygen to your brain. You take that blood pressure medication, it manages the condition. Now you have normal blood pressure, but now I can't perfuse my brain. I can't perfuse my fingers, my toes. So I develop neuropathy in my extremities, and your brain is getting neuropathy too. And that's why you're going to find out that down the line, you're going to wind up with brain-based problems, Alzheimer's, dementia, because you didn't oxygenate your brain for years. And the other thing we know is in time, your body is pretty smart. As Sara was saying, there's an innate intelligence here. And so what does the body do? It says, well, heck, if that pathway isn't working to raise the blood pressure, I'll use another pathway. And so then your doctor's like, oh, that one blood pressure is not working. I'll give you 2 blood pressure medications, one for this and one for that pathway. And it works temporarily to manage the condition. It doesn't fix the underlying issue. It just manages the condition. And then that doesn't work. And then you need a 3rd type of blood pressure medication to treat it. Again, not addressing it. Meantime, all of that stuff is creating chaos with other systems. All those blood pressure medications, I've done Thyroid Thursdays on this, on how they all affect thyroid physiology in one way or the other. But that is a management model. Now you move to functional or integrative medicine. We have a management model in functional or integrated medicine where they say T4 is good, but T3 is low. We'll just give you T3. And maybe it happened in your case, I don't know. But if somebody looked at your labs while you're having liver enzymes sky high, well, your T3 is low, that is the problem. You need T3 to drive your mitochondria. You need T3 to run your detoxification pathways. Obviously, the easy thing to do, let me just give you T3 or T2 or whatever somebody wants to give. But in our job in functional and integrated medicine shouldn't be the management model. You can do it. People do it. If they want to do it and the patients want it, that's awesome. I'm not complaining. Everybody gets to choose their choice. But my opinion of functional medicine is we need to interpret and ask better questions. When you come in with liver enzymes sky high, I wouldn't be shocked that your T4 to T3 conversion was down. I would, matter of fact, expect it. And if it wasn't elevated or it wasn't decreased, reverse T3 wasn't up, T3 was down, and those were normal, that's where we still have to interpret and say, okay, wait a second. There's no way those values should be normal. So if they're normal in the blood, that's inappropriate for the person sitting in front of me. And you may not have heard my rants before, but when we look at labs, too many people are just trying to play whack-a-mole with a number. But in reality, what we should be doing in functional medicine saying is that number normal and appropriate, normal and inappropriate, abnormal and appropriate, or abnormal and inappropriate. And in your situation, when somebody says, hey, your T3 is low, okay. That means there's some type of cell stress. There's an adaptive downregulation. Now let me go see if there's inflammatory markers that would indicate there's a cell stress and inflammatory process. And then let me go look at the rest of the labs to see what tissues and systems are being impacted. How's my blood glucose regulation? Oh, it's not good. I'm glucose resistant. Of course you would be, right? Mm-hmm. How's my liver function? How's my renal function? How's my adrenal function? You should have expected, and I don't know what your labs look like, but we would expect that all those systems would be compromised because you're in an extreme cell stress, right?
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that. So as the process went, my cholesterol was higher. My iron and ferritin were too high, and I've always run low. So my liver was not processing my iron properly. My blood sugar, I don't eat much sugar. I eat all whole foods. My blood sugar was high, even though my insulin level was very low. My blood sugar and A1C were too high.
So we'll cycle back and talk about that one because that's a biggie.
That is a biggie. And what's so interesting, as my liver enzymes came down and was more healthy, not changing my diet, my metabolism and thyroid increased, my energy increased, my blood glucose came down, and I didn't change anything. And so what you're saying is so true. The body is adapting for survival. It's smart. So when you throw these other hormones or other things at it, that's just going to add another stressor. Yeah. And and my reverse T3 was high, free T3 was low. But this was what was funny is I had multiple doctors kind of give me guidance because I always get a second, third, and fourth opinion because I love to gather all the information and figure out what intuitively feels right to me, especially when I'm the test case. And according to one doctor, I was hyperthyroid because my TSH was too low and my T4 was high. But then you look at my free T3, my reverse T3, and another doctor says you're hypo.
Mhm.
So you've got two functional practitioners giving you the exact opposite diagnosis. And going back to what you were trying to ask me twice, and I never really got around to the answer as far as like, am I ADHD? Is that my identity? Is that my identity? And I'm a victim of a hypothyroid patient. I'm a victim of a depressed person.
Mhm.
That is the mindset that keeps people stuck.
Mhm.
And when I was going through my situation, it was like, no, I'm not someone with low testosterone. I'm not someone with low thyroid. I'm not someone with a bad liver. I'm someone that's going through a crisis that's going to come out, and I'm going to feel better than ever because I've overcome something. I've become more resilient, and I know that I can overcome the next challenge.
Yeah.
So there's the mindset too part of it that is really important for people to grasp.
Oh yeah, I think it's critical. I talk about the fitness factors. These are at different aspects of your health that you have to have that are going to affect your health and well-being and your stress load. And I've got 18 of them. I think my book, I started with 10 and now we're at 18, and there's what I call the foundational 5, and mindset's one of them. If you go into a process believing, like in thyroid world, where we say your thyroid gland's attacking you, and your antibodies are like little Pac-Man eating away your gland, that's a very negative image that you're putting in your mind, and your body is probably going to have a hard time healing and repairing because you're thinking your immune system is attacking you for no apparent reason. You think your immune system is destroying your gland. That's not a great way to go to bed every night. Like, my body is attacking me. There's no way you're really going to get healthy with a mindset like that, because that creates stress in your brain. And when you create a stress response in your brain and it's chronic, it upregulates your limbic system, that upregulates your sympathetic nervous system. It makes you hypervigilant to things and downregulates your heal, rest, and recover physiology. So we have to change the conversation to our clients, and we have to help you change your mindset to one where thyroid recovery is possible. Health recovery is possible. My body is trying to protect me from something. I need to identify what that is. Is it some type of physical stress and strain? Is it chemical? Is it toxins? Is it organisms? Is it my relationship with my spouse? Is it my relationship with my kids? Is it my disrupted sleep, my disrupted breathing? Is it my financial stress? Or is it the load that I can no longer manage? And that it's usually the load, not the thing. And that's one of the things that kind of early on in that conversation, I think, was one of those points I wanted to get. Like, you focused on the diet and the nutrients in the beginning, but I'm guessing that what you learned over this 15-year journey, ups and downs with challenges, is that the load is the bigger issue than the thing, right? The thing is often what catches our eye, because that happened, then my health went down. And we think it's that last thing. And I'll repeat this because I think it's important. And I talk about the time. We have to think about our physiology. Like, if I had 2 cinder blocks and a board going across them, we're all adaptable to a load, and we can do a load, lots of different stuff. Some people can manage a bigger load. Some people can't manage a big load before it triggers a stress response. But if we went through life and all the things that we go on through life were like 5, 10, 25 pound weights, and we stack them on this board, and the board's capacity is 100 pounds, I could walk around every day at 98 pounds capacity on the board, and the board is still good. That's a lot of stress. But if I come in one day and drop a 30-pound weight on there, like I just got fired, that's breaking the board. I exceeded capacity. Now everything is not going to work very well, right? All systems now have to adapt. There's limited energy, there's limited resources. Now everything needs to kind of down-regulate a bit. And just because you get a new job doesn't mean you fix the physiology. The board's still broken. Now you have to reduce the stress. The stressors you were able to manage before, you got to reduce those even more to get out of that cell stress response. So as you were going through that journey, how long did it take before that aha moment came in? It's not just about the nutrients and what I eat. That's critically important. But how about the life stressors, work, relationships, mind, like we talked about, how long did it take before those things really start to kick in?
So I've taken you through part of the journey. So another thing that happened as I was on this cleansing of the liver and my liver enzymes were getting better, I started a medication that I shouldn't have started. I can't name it. It's an antiparasitic. But what it did was actually pissed off the parasites in my body. And what is the largest detox organ? It's not the liver, it's the skin.
Hmm.
So I literally had skin rashes and worms and parasites coming out of my skin. Not to get graphic or disgusting, but my body was literally expelling worms and parasites through the skin. And what happens with these parasites, they are the king of the kingdom. If you think you're in control of your body, nope, these parasites are in control. They control your brain, they control everything. They protect, then they've got fungus that protects the viruses. I had the varicella virus, which has been triggered in a lot of people due to the spike protein, which can manifest in the shingles, chicken pox, all of the herpes virus. So I had shingles as part of my skin rash, and then I had worms, and then I had other breakouts, and it was just all over. And Eric, it was the most difficult health crisis that I have ever experienced in my life. I do not suffer from depression or anxiety, but I sure had anxiety attacks during the last 3 months.
But you should, right?
Yes,
right.
exactly.
So I think it's sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's important because you said, when you talk about that, but somebody might say, well, the anxiety is a problem or the depression was a problem.
Right.
You should absolutely, if your body is in that much stress, you should absolutely expect to have depression. You should absolutely expect to have anxiety. You absolutely should expect to have some insomnia. You should expect that your sex hormones are going to become dysregulated, not just because you can't detox them, but because your adrenal gland's primary focus, we're at different, we get to different stages of life and the sex organs aren't making the hormones, and we have to rely on the adrenals to make a lot of these things. But how does your body make these hormones? It needs T3 to convert cholesterol in your mitochondria into these hormones. Well, what's the most important one to make? If you already have reduced T3 in circulation because of the stress response, now I have a harder time getting cholesterol into the cells to make it into hormones. And I've downregulated the mitochondria at the same time. So how am I going to make them? And with the limited resources, what am I making? You're not making sex hormones. You're making stimulatory defense hormones. You may temporarily make more cortisol, make more catecholamines. And the issue here is you should expect all of those things, which I'm sure you did, but that's the point. Somebody's listening to that and go, oh my gosh. And then you had anxiety on top of it.
Yeah,
of course.
Right. And you mentioned sleep. I was up in the middle of the night. The parasites like to wiggle around and crawl around at night. And so your skin's itching, you're oozing out. It's disgusting. You're up in the middle of the night. You don't want to wake up your spouse. Everything's disrupted. But I kept saying, okay, God, what are you teaching me here? And the biggest lesson that God was teaching me through this process is I am not dependent on all these things like I think I am in my life that helps me feel in control. That I was stripped away from a lot of things that I love to do, or, sauna. I couldn't go in the sauna with my skin breakout. I couldn't work out as hard as I wanted to. I had to focus more on my sleep because I knew I was going to be up in the middle of the night for a couple hours. I absolutely could not touch any processed food, alcohol, or anything that was outside the realm of fun, the most basic healthy food. And then this was the hard part, is different practitioners gave me recommendations for different supplements. And one person would say you need to take 9 of these a day. The other person would say that's toxic for your body. So I had to sift through and intuitively really listen to my body as far as how it would respond to certain things. Now, the best news is I did find a supplement that literally broke down the chitin. So fungus has this hard shell like lobster and crab that protects the viruses inside. So my immune system was strong, but my immune system couldn't get to the virus. So this supplement broke down the chitin, and my immune system quickly cleared up everything. And it was this big aha moment. But the bigger lesson was not all things are needed at huge high doses and forever. And the body is resilient. And just like you're saying, the body is doing all of these adaptive measures for survival. Just trust in the process. Don't throw hormones at your thyroid or your sex hormones if they're low on a blood test. And maybe away from this health crisis I had, maybe normally I run at a low free T3, but I feel good. Maybe I'm more sensitive to free T3 than the next person.
Yeah.
And I believe you talk a lot about that too. It's not just about the blood test. The blood test is great. It's a measure. It's a data point, but there's so much more. And and when you're talking about the load on your body, it was that one thing that was the tipping point. It wasn't that one thing that caused all the issues, right?
Yeah, that's what, and I guess that was the follow-up question. Like,
yeah,
you were doing a lot of things for health. You may have even been cruising along and doing pretty well. Kind of the load was manageable. And you might have had, I don't know the story, but maybe you had some low-level parasitic activity, some low-level viral activity. And even though they may have been latent organisms or dormant organisms, probably not replicating, or you would have known that there was a big replicating issue more than likely. But was there a trigger that was the thing that really kind of broke the board in that situation? Was it the addition of some type of, was it work stress? Was it life stress? Was it a new medication, a new supplement, a new hormone? And the reason I ask that for the listeners, it's important to hear that part, because so many people say, well, this is the same, when I'm talking to them about what's creating the current stress load, they're like, these are all the same stressors I had right up until I got diagnosed and I started getting symptomatic. Right. But I need to know what those things are to help reduce them, as well as the thing that you relate it to, because that may have been a very small stressor, but it was all, let's say I'm at 98% capacity, and you were managing that. And then you have a small stressor, like maybe a small stressor is the addition of a high dose supplement that you couldn't use, or something that's triggering more oxidative stress. And maybe it's not that, it shouldn't have been that big of a deal, but it was a 5-pound weight that pushed you over capacity. And now the whole system's like, holy cow, we're in danger mode. Shut it all down, ramp up the inflammation.
Yeah, no, it was the medication that was the tipping point. But as I'm coming out of it, as I'm at the tail end, it's 98% gone. If I have a stressful day, I'll have a skin flare up. And it will just show up for 24 hours and go away. But it's a signal to me saying, you're too stressed. Yeah. Lower that stress. You need to work on mindfulness. You need to go for a walk. You need to get better sleep, whatever it is. So it is these little signals where my body is not out of the fight or flight stage yet. And it's using my skin as kind of the reminder of take care of yourself.
I think I think that's a really important point, because a lot of times people are on their health recovery journey. They're working on their stressors. They're reducing the stress load. They're starting to heal. They're starting to repair. They're starting to lose weight. They're feeling better. And then something happens and they get the same symptomatic expression back and they think they're worse again. I'm like, you're not worse. Look at your symptoms have come down. Your measurables are improved. All these things. Your body has created a way to deal with the stress response, and it's going to manifest as certain signs and symptoms. Skin issue. So the next time the system's overly stressed, well, we know exactly what to do here. This is what we're doing. This is like if a plane's going to crash, you listen to that conversation, like what to do on the plane, the thing that everybody ignores, like, hey, leave your stuff, put the thing on, do it over and over again. Because if the plane goes down, you need to know what to do. Once you build a pattern, a protective pattern in, the next time your body starts sensing danger, it's going to be like, I'm going to go right back to that pattern. That's what I need to do to defend myself. This is how I support my detoxification pathways on this area. So I think it's really important that you said that, because so many people think they're worse in those situations. Yeah. And if they're not really worse, that just tells you you're still on the healing journey. And if you get a little bit more stress or strain, or a little bit more stress on the physiology, the body's probably going to respond the same way it did before.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot about stress versus perceived stress. We're all going to have stressors in life. They're all going to come and go. Are you going to choose to see it as a 1 or a 10? Because we're going to go through this stressor, whether it's the flu, a financial stress, a child stress, whatever it is. How are you going to see it? Because I have multiple people in my personal life, family members, best friends, all of them very health conscious, saying, I'm not getting the results on my body. I'm not burning the fat and building the muscle like I want to. I'm eating clean. I'm taking the supplements. I'm exercising every day. Well, what is it? It's the stress. It's the stress that is putting your body into survival mode, converting that T4 into reverse T3, shutting down metabolism, storing the cortisol belly fat, causing the hair loss, causing the skin to get creepy and thin, water retention, oxidative stress, inflammation, constipation, all the things. And you're thinking, I'm doing everything right. And
yeah. Right. Well, I think the issue is that sometimes we think that stress is just emotional, right?
Right.
And sometimes we don't realize that some of the things we're doing diet habit wise are part of that stress response. So when we talk about stress, there's positive stress, there's negative stress, and neither's good nor bad, right? It's about the adaptability. But I totally agree with what you just said. And I think you meant really from the emotional stress perspective, right? Bad stuff is going to happen. The question is, are you going to carry that with you through life like you're loading up a backpack? At some point, that backpack is going to be weighing you down significantly. Bad stuff happens to everybody. The secret, from my opinion, and for, everybody has a story to tell, right? But the secret for me, what's helped me, is to realize that a lot of this stuff is really about how I interpret it and reframe it. Mm-hmm. And I had somebody pretty angry at me when we were talking about what was going on in their life with family and work and everything else. And I'm like, look, you can look at it like it's all terrible, but then how am I going to help you get better? Because if you're constantly telling yourself this is terrible, it's all this stuff happened to me. I said, the other thing you can do is you can reframe the situation. I'm losing my job. Did you love the job? No, not really. Great. Now you've got the opportunity to go find a job that is better for you. I love that job. Do you think there's other jobs out there that you might love? Yeah. Well, why don't you use this as a tool? You might get a better paying job. Now you already did this. You love this. Now go to another company that might hire you for the same thing with your experience and your passion. And now you may get a better job. My mother passed away. Okay. You can have your pity party. You're entitled to it. But at some point, if you keep thinking in your mind that that's terrible, I'll never see my mom again, everything's awful, I'm sad, it's going to manifest as chronic stress and inflammation cell danger response in your physiology. The other thing you could do is reframe that situation and say, you know what, I'm so sad that my mom's gone, but I choose to reflect on all the great moments that I spent with her and what she taught me and what I learned from her and how she treated my kids and what what came from that relationship with her. And it changes your physiology almost instantly. And we have control of that, right? So I think that's really important. You have to have the right mindset. Stress is going to happen. It's how you frame it, how you reframe it to help you become stronger and more resilient. The other option is I'm going to let this be the anchor that sinks my health in my ship.
Right. And I've taken every health challenge, whether it's me or my children, and saying, okay, God, I know you're doing something special with this. What are you going to teach me? And, back up to my son, we had the 9-year-old cancer issue, but when he was 15, immune system strong, rowing as an athlete in high school, they won and broke the national record at rowing for at nationals his sophomore year in high school. But his heart was stopping. I went into his room at 2 a.m. after hearing him pound on the wall, and he's pounding on his chest to get his heart to go again. The poor kid has already gone through enough. And I didn't know what to do. There's nothing I could do, just wait for 30 seconds to get his heart to start again. And we take a deep breath after the episode passed. We sit on his bed, and he looks at me and he goes, Mom, we did it once before. We're going to do it again. We're going to figure this out. And that was the mindset that I had instilled in him, and I had instilled it into my 2 other kids and myself. Like, even through this horrific experience that I've gone through, I knew there was a lesson. I knew there was a bigger picture. And my son, his heart was perfect. Nothing wrong with it. Went to 2 cardiologists, passed with flying colors. He was low in electrolytes. He was training like an Olympic athlete, and he was not supplementing like one.
Yeah.
And what a great lesson for a boy that is going to run himself into the ground because he has so much energy, to teach him, his sisters, and me as a health coach to provide information to everyone listening.
Yeah, really important. I mean, there's a lot of people who, me included, who train. And we grew up in an era, at least I did, in an era where harder was better. And you wanted every workout to feel like you would just exhausted. And I tell this story on the podcast multiple times, is that, I was training in my 40s for endurance events like I'm still in my 20s, while trying to, run a family, run a business, coach, and do all the study and research on 4 hours of sleep. And then shocked when I run just my blood chemistry to see how healthy I was. And you see glucose resistance and adrenal issues and Hashimoto's and elevated inflammatory marker. And you see all these things going on. I'm like, I'm not listening to my own advice. Right. So it does, even exercise, if done chronically, done consistently, limited recovery and limited appropriate support, can become problematic. And that's important. And it's not a great lesson. It's a lesson learned, but you hate to see that happen, obviously, to your kids. But these are things. Sometimes we think lots of supplements, as many as I need to take, is not going to be a problem. Oftentimes it is. It's one of the first things I often do with people, is wean them off of their supplements. And then what are the key? I think we need to think about supplementation as strategic, right? Strategic. And you said this before. There's very few things that I think we all need to take forever. There are some things I think can be very beneficial depending on your physical activity and your lifestyle and your diet, and what you do. Most of the rest of the supplementation is taking lots and copious amounts of them is probably not beneficial. You would be far better off eating healthy whole food, having good dietary habits, chewing your food, and taking maybe some betaine HCl and a digestive enzyme to break your food down better than you would to take 20 bottles of multivitamins and micronutrients. Because that's way more expensive than eating healthy. And you're getting many times, and this may probably happen to you, we're getting super physiologic doses of supplements. And sometimes, depending on where you get them and the quality of what they make, who knows what else is in there. And not all supplements are made the same in the quality. I know that firsthand. I'm sure you know that firsthand. But it's really important that we strategically supplement, and it's based on the individual, not based on a condition, not based on a diagnosis. It's really based on the individual, what you're trying to accomplish. And for me, I'm a minimalist, so I don't like people taking a lot of different things. If you want to take them, that's up to you. But I can't express how many times I've seen somebody that is really struggling on lots and lots of bottles of supplements. And as we wean them off of those supplements, they're like, I'm 50% better. Yeah. Because you were over supplementing. You were thinking that you could dictate what those micronutrients were going to do. And you don't get that choice. Just like you don't get you can tell your child to go clean the room, but they have the ultimate decision whether they want to clean their room or not. So anyway, we didn't get to half of the stuff I wanted to talk to you about, but we are running up against that 90 minutes, and I do want to respect your time. So why don't we do this? If we can always have you come back on for another conversation and talk about some of the topics we didn't get to cover. Mm-hmm. But why don't you give everybody a little bit more information about you and your company and what you do?
So Accelerated Health Products is my company brand of supplements. And the reason that as we're talking about how we don't need supplements, we designed supplements that we feel benefit most everybody, but the difference is they're clean. There's no fillers. And sometimes the supplements that you're taking that are backfiring, it's because of the fillers and the extra ingredients that are not listed that are on them. And that I've had bad experiences with things like that. And that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And for instance, an essential amino acid supplement, the most popular brand, was backing up my liver. It was causing water retention. It was causing symptoms that didn't make sense. So I had to come out with Accelerated Aminos, which not only has the 9 amino acids, but other ingredients to prevent muscle breakdown, increase energy, increase ATP, and also heal the gut. So you're absorbing up to 40% more of the amino acids and the rest of the dietary nutrients you're taking in. So that's just an example. So our company incorporates Ayurvedic herbs, Chinese herbs, modern day nutraceuticals, and then all enhanced with scalar frequencies that increase the efficacy of the supplement. We are very meticulous about the ratios of the ingredients, where they come from around the globe, to make sure that we're not getting dead herbs that are dried in the sun, but they have life force, and that's a whole nother conversation. Mm-hmm. But they're very effective. People feel the difference right away. I do personal protocols for people. If you are listening, you're like, I don't know where to start, I've got all these symptoms, you can just email me through the website, fill out the protocol form, and I will personally put together a protocol for you. And I'll look at your supplements that you're currently on, what you're eating, what foods might be triggering negative responses, and what you could replace them with, and also according to your tolerance. If you're into a full cleanse, or if you just want to start with one supplement. I do not, I listen to you. I have my podcast, Accelerated Health with Sara Banta, which Dr. Eric is going to be on. And that is on over 100 different podcast outlets. Wherever you're listening to your podcast, you will find me. And my website is sarabantahealth.com. You can search almost any topic, whether it's GERD or menopausal symptoms or how to burn fat and build muscle at the same time. The topics are covered, and I have tons of articles and podcasts there as resources as well. My free group coaching I do on Telegram. You post your questions daily. I post tips and tools daily. It's a constant communication, a like-minded supportive group to help you along your journey, to keep you moving forward daily. So my goal is to not have you get a whole bunch of dietary and supplemental recommendations and then give up day 2 because you don't know where to start. So I'm here to support you. I'm extremely passionate about what I do. And with the differences I've seen in me and my own family, I know there's an answer. I know there's answers out there, and I'm here to help.
All right, Sara, thanks so much for coming on the Thyroid Answers podcast. And I'm sure we'll have another discussion soon.
Amazing. Thank you.